half-assed Daily Decembear. Hey, I'm Tommy, and this is our half-assed Daily Decembear, and my guest today is David Perkins. Now, one of the things that has inspired me to do this show is that I had a bunch of friends that I thought were very interesting, but their Facebook timelines don't tell that story. And David is one of those people. One of the most recent events on his timeline is his wedding to his partner Josh. And why don't you talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get more into some of the more interesting things about you.
Okay, so the wedding itself was surprisingly dull, but the story is kind of involved. The sort of history of my legal relationship with my partner, who I will have been with 11 years in March, starts when I moved to Texas for the first time, which is where I met you. I was moving to the University of Texas at Dallas as a PhD student, and I wanted to live in on-campus housing with my partner. The web page for housing said students, faculty, staff, and their families. So I emailed them just to be sure, what do I have to do for Josh to count as my family? A couple of rounds and a change in the website language to legally married guardians or children later, and they told me that I should just bring whatever I have that proves we're a couple, and they'll see if that's enough. Okay? When I was first living in Chicago, I never really thought about legal recognition because no one would question us. You can live with whoever you want. You can set up whatever legal agreements you want, and there weren't a whole lot of legal recognition options at the time. Well, once Bring Us Everything You Have started, it became more of an issue. We got a civil union, a domestic partnership in Cook County before we moved to Texas. I was there for a few years. I returned to Chicago, and we got a civil union. And a couple of weeks ago, we had the civil union upconverted into a marriage. We did this over a long lunch break, and I only told one of my coworkers. And so, sort of, this is an interesting process that a lot of people don't share, where, since it's been the domestic partnership, the civil union, and then the wedding, like people ask, what anniversary do you celebrate, and how long have you been together, and how long have you been married, are two completely different questions, sometimes with several answers, and a lot of the sort of public celebration has been sort of bled out of it. Like, the reason we didn't tell our coworkers isn't that we weren't happy, it's that we're bringing attention to the fact that we weren't married before. You always get a couple of people who have really well-meaning tendencies to accidentally say the worst thing. So when we were first in Texas, one of the people in housing said, "Oh, just get a civil union or a domestic partnership here in Richardson, and it'll be fine." And I had to explain to this person who was in charge of housing on campus and who lived there that you can't get a domestic partnership in most of Texas. And after we got married, one of my friends on Facebook said, "Oh, I don't know, was this like some spiritual recommitment? Like, why did you decide to change from a civil union to a marriage? I hope you know we all always thought of you as married." And I had to explain that until very recently, we weren't actually married.
Wow.
What is...
So, yeah, Harry and I sort of have the same sort of issue. So we had a holy union, which is the church version of the civil union, 20 years ago, and so we don't celebrate the date for that ceremony either. So how has that affected you now that you've got all your dots, all your T's crossed and your I's dotted?
So we've been practicing saying husband instead of partner, which
good.
Is an adjustment. It's kind of adorable, but it's an adjustment for both of us. And I've started to make more of a point of using that word in social contexts where straight people might be present. One thing I've noticed is that if you're gay or another member of the LGBTQ umbrella, often you refer to your partner by their name. Most of the straight people I work with don't do that. So, like, my husband this, my wife that. And it struck me as really weird, and then it occurred to me that if you're in a same-sex relationship, there is no word you can use that either won't confuse people or might not piss them off. And so I think we all just kind of got used to it. It honestly, and this is sort of petty, it cuts our tax bill by like 2/3. The cost of just preparing taxes by 2/3. Because previous to this, you had to prepare individual federal returns plus a joint federal return you didn't file to do your state returns against. So we went from having 3 federal returns to 1 to have prepared.
Wow. But you haven't done that yet. So, but that's next.
No, but it's coming. Very, very soon. Happy end of the year, everyone.
Yes. So the other thing that I know about you is that you are a gamer, so board gaming and card gaming primarily. So you were telling me about this card game that you've been playing lately?
So I've been playing Netrunner, which is a reincarnation of the old Wizards of the Coast game. The game's sort of plot premise is it's, 90s hacker movie, the card game. So one player plays the corporation who wants to set up servers and advance usually nefarious agendas, and the other player is the hacker who wants to steal those agendas. There's a couple interesting aspects of this, besides the fact that for gamers, Fantasy Flight and Wizards of the Coast have teamed up, which means like the 2 biggest duopoly members in gaming are now issuing products together. One is that it's a living card game. So you've probably all seen Magic players who come home with boxes and boxes and boxes of cards, hoping to get the ones that they want. A living card game doesn't work like that. You buy fixed sets of cards, and you know what's going to be in them. So a lot of players who've burned out on Magic or don't want to spend half their paycheck on randomly selected cards have been playing Fantasy Flight's living card games. I like that a lot. And then the other aspect is the 2 different playstyles for the hacker and the corporation are completely different. The corporation plays with their cards face down, and it's mostly a bluffing game, whereas the hacker plays with all their cards face up, and it's more of a resource management game.
Interesting. So what are some other games in that style? You said Fantasy Flight has other living card games?
So one that I would like to play but haven't played yet is the Cthulhu living card game, which shares a lot of its rules principles with the My Little Pony CCG, actually. It's a resource allocation game where there are goal cards that either player can play, and you have resource cards that represent groups or people that you assign to them to try and win those challenges first. Another one that's in the LCG format but isn't competitive is the Lord of the Rings card game. The new Star Wars game is also an LCG. For those who don't know, Fantasy Flight owns the rights to Star Trek, Star Wars, Lovecraft's mythos, Warhammer, and basically your entire childhood. So, if you had a really nerdy childhood.
Right. So, what are some of the cooperative board games you were talking about earlier?
So, Arkham Horror is like the classic entry in the cooperative board game like subgenre, and the idea is that instead of having players play against each other to race to meet a goal, the board has a bunch of semi-random countdowns, or sometimes not so random, that are motivated by different things that happen on the board or cards that you draw, and that tell you what game effects are in play or what the monsters do, and the players work together to accomplish the goal before the big timer that is the board ticks down. They actually use this to teach game theory in the Arts and Technology College at the University of Texas at Dallas.
Wow.
Arkham Horror is huge and has like half a dozen expansions or more, including several board expansions. So if you play too much, you start seeing all tables inside in terms of how many Arkham boards you could put on it. There are a couple other entries into this in the same family. There's like the baby version, which is Elder Sign, which is a dice game, and Eldritch Horror, which is like a medium complexity version. That's easier to carry around and set up. I've never won. Like, Arkham Horror is a game you can win at least 3/4 of the time if you know what you're doing. Even the people who own the local game store have only won Eldritch Horror maybe 1 time in 10. So if you want to play that one, it's fun, but get used to losing.
Now, have you played any of the ones like Pandemic or Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Island?
I have not played either of those, although I've certainly heard of them. I have played Knights of the Round, which is cooperative for the most part. Or is it Knights of Camelot? I'm sure if you look up Camelot cooperative card game, you would find it. The players play, the Knights of the Round Table, and there are a bunch of different tasks they can accomplish, work to accomplish, and put swords around the table. And if you get the sword for winning a task, it's a white sword, and if you get the sword for failing a task, it's a black sword. And the goal is to have more than half white swords by the end of the game. Much like the Battlestar Galactica game, one of the players is a betrayer and is actually working for the forces of darkness. This player acts like they're on your side and takes normal actions until close to the very end of the game or until they're revealed. Interesting quirk about this, you don't want to say who the betrayer is too early, because until you reveal them, they have to at least pretend to be helping you. And once you reveal them, they don't take good side actions anymore. So if you even blurt out, I think he's the traitor, too early, you can make the game much harder for yourself.
Oh. And there's several other betrayer games like that. I know of Betrayal at House on the Hill. It goes along where it's cooperative to a point, and then something triggers the betrayal, and any player can become the betrayer.
Okay, the Battlestar Galactica game and the it's bothering me, I can't think of the name. The Knights of Camelot game I was talking about before, you get your roles assigned at the beginning. Okay. So I will have to look at Betrayal at the House on... I want to say the House on Haunted Hill, but that's something else.
Yes, I have to keep not saying haunted, even though haunting is an important part of the game at some point.
I will have to look into that one.
Yes.
I have recently taken a trip down retro gaming. I've started a board game night at my new job, and some of the people who come have been bringing in either reprints or originals of older games. Now, some of these are older games that aren't really old, like the old Steve Jackson Hackers game or Illuminati, and some of them are reprints of like a game called Nuclear War, which is
Nuclear War.
Definitely a product of its time, and even if you reprint it, it's still retro because we just don't live in that cultural climate anymore.
Right, mutual assured destruction and 100 megaton bombs and things.
Yeah, which I found Nuclear War to be fairly quick playing and to pretty well embody its namesake. So once the game starts to go, it's over pretty quick.
Yes, I haven't played it in probably 20 years, but yeah, it's a card game, right?
Yeah, it's mostly cards with placemats, but it's cards.
Yeah. Okay.
And that spinner. Spinners are like the bane of card gaming existence because their default action is break.
There you go. Yeah.
So what's interesting about the Nuclear War spinner is the sheet that has the spinner on it. It's just a piece of paper, but it has roll 2d6 for the same effect. Except if you do the math, the probabilities for the roll 2 dice instead function don't match the probabilities on the spinner wheel.
Of course. So, what are some other games you would recommend?
That's a surprisingly difficult question because I'm not sure who I'm recommending them to.
Okay.
Flux is always a good one. It's quick playing. It's good for people who haven't gamed a whole lot in the past. But the fact that the rules keep changing can be very confusing to new people or people who are used to like more traditional card games, I think.
And there's a lot of expansions for that, so if you want a more themed version of that, you can get that.
Yeah, and the expansions all stand alone. So it's not like other games where you need the base game and whatever the expansion is. You can just get Cthulhu Flux or Monty Python Flux or Star Flux, which is general sci-fi themed, and just play that.
Right.
So that's pretty good for entry level. if you are an experienced gamer and you want to break your friends into the hobby easy, cooperative board games are really good. And then you get to sort of semi-game mastered games like Descent. I hate to say you're grooming them for D&D or whatever, but you totally are.
So what is that? I mean, what is the premise of that game?
So, Descent is basically D&D Combat, the quick version. There's no story, it's just a dungeon crawler. And one player plays the monster side and is basically the GM. He gets a certain amount of points every turn, and he gets certain points whenever the players, say, defeat a monster or whatever, and he can use those points to deploy more monsters. And I'm a little fuzzy, but I think Descent is one of the ones where as you explore, the board is made up of different tiles, and whenever you hit the edge of a tile, you play a new room, unless you hit, the actual edge of the dungeon. That can be a lot of fun if you enjoy D&D style dungeon crawlers and don't want to spend a lot of time on plot or character creation. The Ravenloft board game is very similar to that, except there is no GM player. The cards and the scenario you're playing through instruct you what the monsters do. The downside of the Ravenloft one, and I hate to speak negatively of my favorite campaign setting, is that it's very poorly balanced, so you as players don't have the opportunity to make plans. You don't necessarily feel like you're playing the game, you feel like the game is playing you.
Oh dear. Okay. And those games are still in print?
Oh yeah. Descent and its descendants definitely are, and that's another one that comes in a number of varieties. The Ravenloft game either is still in print or was in print less than 6 months ago. I'm trying to think what else I would use as starter games for people. Power Grid is actually a lot of fun. It's a little bit like Ticket to Ride, which I know you've played before.
Right.
But it's a little bit better balanced for people to come back from behind, and the pieces are less tiny.
That helps.
As manufacturing technology has improved and it's become cheaper to make more and more detailed pieces, smaller and smaller, I'm not sure that just because you can, you should. So I opened some of these board games. Any piece smaller than the head of a pencil eraser is probably too tiny.
Yeah, all the little tiny personnel in Puerto Rico, for example.
I have seen Puerto Rico. I have not played it.
So yeah, all the immigrants or people coming are about the size of an eraser, of a pencil eraser. About half as tall. Yeah.
I sneezed and now the game is over.
That's it exactly. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share with the audience about board gaming or about getting married or anything like that?
Well, I definitely don't want my experiences with the wedding to come across as negative at all. I'm definitely happy to have it done. And as a part of the wedding and celebrating our 10th anniversary, we got, and I don't think these will show up particularly good on the webcam, custom puzzle rings, which I was perfectly happy to show off on my Facebook page. I will actually let it come apart.
Oh, wow.
That is 8 bands, and it took over an hour to order these, because you have to pick how many bands you want. They come in 4, 8, 10, and I think higher number of bands.
Wow.
What thickness you want them to be, and then what style of knot you want, and then each band can be a different metal.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
If you are a fidgeter, or you know fidgeters, they are a lot of fun. I get no end of joy of dropping them in front of engineers and watching them fall to pieces. And if you're looking for something unique, the combinatorial explosion of options is such that whatever ring you get, you're very unlikely to run into someone else with the same one.
Very good.
There was something else, but it's gone now. I was distracted by the shiny.
Yes. So how can people find you online?
The most effective way to find me actually is through Facebook, although sadly I don't use it very much. And you can find my Tumblr through my Facebook. I have a serious Tumblr that I admit to, and a very easy-to-find fandom Tumblr full of cat pictures that you can find on your own.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, David. And if you've been watching and you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't, hit the subscribe button. And until tomorrow, we'll have another Daily Decembear.
It was nice talking to you.